to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next thing I'd like to do is one of our very active,
Roll call.
oh, well, no, I know that.
Oh, I see.
One of these very active citizens in our community that did a lot of work on the rail committee. He passed away, and so I'd like to have a minute of silence first before we start in his memory. So thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Holland.
Here.
Councilmember DeGolia,
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis,
Here.
Vice Mayor,
Here.
and Mayor Whitmer.
Here.
Thank
Okay. The next item is public comments. If you want to make a public comment, you can do it one time on each subject. If you want to comment on something that's not on the agenda, it would be great for you to bring it up now. The council can't respond to those things, but if you have something pertinent, we'll make a note and put it on a future agenda, which would be publicized. So are there any public comments? And the time limit is 3 minutes. So any public comments here? Any online?
I see none online.
Okay, well. So we'll close public comments for this right now. And we have a few presentations. First is the introduction of our facilities and maintenance manager, who just joined us, and he's taking care of all the technology, all the equipment here. That this is a very complicated system, and so we'd like to have everybody meet him.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Robert Ovadia, the Public Works Director. I want to take this opportunity to introduce Tony Enixon. He just started with us a couple of weeks ago as our new Public Works Maintenance Manager. And as the mayor indicated, he is going to be managing our contract crews, everything ranging from streets, storm drains, facility management, parks, landscaping. He's slowly taking those things on, and we're happy to have him. Just a little bit of background. Tony actually lives just a couple miles away from here. And so it's nice to have somebody close by to help us out. He's lived in the Bay Area since like the 1980s. And so he's a local native, and he's got 5 kids, 3 dogs, and 4 grandkids. And so before coming to us, most recently, he ran his own business in water, wastewater instrumentation. So the technology stuff he's adept at in that regard. And prior to that, he spent 12 years in facilities management, working for a couple of different biotech firms. And so he has some of that experience that we need here. So we're really happy to have Tony here. And I know he's excited to be here. And so I just wanted to introduce him.
Tony, you want to come up and say a few words?
Yes, I'm very honored to be working for the town of Atherton, and Robert has been a great mentor already, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Tony.
Welcome to the team. Very appreciated.
Next, we have a introduction of a new police officer, which the chief, I think, will issue the oath to. So if you'd introduce.
Hopefully it'll work from here. I have a booming voice, I think. And you can stand there. So I'm very pleased, proud and honored to introduce to you Officer Karina Shum. While she may be new to us, she's not new to law enforcement. She's served almost 9 years here in the county. So it's a great find for us. It should be a hit the ground running. We do have to, she's good to go now. We have to have her train with some of our cross TOs for 5 weeks. She's from South San Francisco City, where she was born. She was raised by her parents, who I think are here. All right, awesome. With her two sisters, and then her husband, Vincent, is an officer with Colma Police. No? That I was played. Well, who knows what's happening? I don't know. That Vincent over there. Not that Vincent there. So. Karina was educated at UC Davis with degrees in communication and psychology. And in reading her resume, she's pretty much done every position we have. She was PIO, she's been watch commander, canine officer, SRO, all those that we have to offer. So we're expecting a lot out of you, and I know you're excited to be here. In interviewing her, it's all about fit, especially here in Athens. We talked about that, and Amanda and I knew that it was a perfect fit. So we're very proud to have it. So with that, I will do the, so if you raise your right hand, repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly affirm and will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of California, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which we are against heaven's oath and acceptance. Audience.
Sure. My parents, Nelson and Candy, my sisters, Isabel and Veronica, my husband.
Vincent, who's this Vincent?
My old coworker.
And we have our track crew from, thank you all for coming out. This is a big deal. So with that, we'll bring it back to you.
Okay, thanks.
She already pinned?
Yeah, yeah.
You're already pinned. Okay, yeah.
Welcome,
Welcome aboard. We're very happy to have you.
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
gonna love
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
It's gonna be great.
Okay. Okay, next we'll go to the departmental reports. Those were included in the packs that were sent out and that were made available also to the public. And so, does anybody have any questions for George on the department reports? Yes or no? No, Rick?
No.
Oh, okay. Anybody in the public would like to make a comment about them? Okay,
I would just
So-
say, I think they're very well done.
okay.
I like all the color and everything, and just really looks very clean. And the grids and everything, a lot of good information. So for you at home, if you want to know what's going on in Atherton, I really encourage you to read the departmental reports, because a lot of work goes into making them and publishing them. Thank you so much. City Manager.
They're included as, you know, it's a group effort for sure. I just do the front page. They do all the hard work, staff. But they're also included online in the archive center under departmental reports, and you can go back months and
Mhm.
download them.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that and changing it. Okay. We had a closed session today. Is Mona online?
I know I'll be doing the report out, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
The council had a closed session for labor negotiations on represented employees, APOA. And there was no reportable action other than direction to staff.
okay. All right, then we move to the consent agenda. So there's items that were in the pack, item number 1 through 7. Does anybody on the council have a question on those? Yes, Rick.
Item number 2, which is the minutes. At the end of the January 11th minutes, it states a motion to approve the housing element for 23 Oakwood at 10 units an acre.
Mhm.
I think that motion was initially at 20 units an acre. And the vote is correct as stated. for the 20 units an acre, and then that was a follow-up motion was made to reduce it from 20 units an acre to 10 units an acre, and that motion carried unanimously, which is not recorded here.
So we're missing one of the motions. We can correct that.
Okay. All right. Does anybody in the audience have a question or a comment on anything that's in the consent agenda, items 1 through 7? Okay, with that,
So moved.
Second,
you want us to do a roll call vote or no?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Anybody opposed? Okay. And we'll go to item number 8, which is waive the second reading of an ordinance that we looked at yesterday to manage residential picketing.
Thank you,
George?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a public hearing, so at the conclusion of the staff report, it'd be appropriate to take public comment. During the last 2 weeks of November 2022 and the first 2 weeks of December, organized protesters demonstrated in front of a residence located on Carolina Avenue in Atherton. The protests took place daily for up to 8 hours per day. The purpose of this amendment to Title IX of the Municipal Code is to adopt Chapter 9.18, addressing targeted residential picketing to protect the peace and tranquility of residents in their homes. It's a content neutral, narrowly tailored time, place, and manner restriction placed on picketers in a limited public forum that will preclude picketers from targeting individual residences by remaining at least 300 feet from any individual targeted residence while leaving open ample alternative channels for communication. Any person violating the provisions of this ordinance would be verbally warned. If after the first warning that continues in violation, he or she could be found guilty of a misdemeanor and separately subject to the provisions of Chapter 8.20 nuisance abatement. The revisions that the council directed at the last council meeting in January are included in the attached ordinance amendment. It's appropriate that the council conduct a public hearing and then waive the second reading by substitution of the title and adopt an ordinance amending Atherton Municipal Code Chapter 9.18 related to targeted residential picketing. That concludes the staff report.
Okay. Any questions for George? We looked at this last time. Okay, any comments or public comments with regards to this item? Zach, come on up.
Zach Whitman from Selby Lane. Just a question, when it's 300 yards, did you say, or 300 feet?
Feet,
300 feet, is that from the property line or from the house structure itself?
property line.
Property line, okay, thank you.
Okay,
Did we raise it to a misdemeanor?
that was in the original agenda, original pack. We've all approved it. Okay, any other public comments on this? Any online?
None online, Mayor.
Okay, we'll close public comments. Back to the council. Any discussion or proposals for approval? Yeah, go ahead.
I move approval of the amendment to Title IX of the Atherton Municipal Code and adoption of Chapter 9.18 related to targeted residential picketing.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, seconded by Diana. All in favor?
I,
Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next, we're going to the discussion of the Housing Coalition letter and other alternative housing solutions.
I think there's a planning commission item before that.
Oh, yeah,
Number
Bob
9.
Polito, yes. We had a vacancy on the planning commission and we had a applicant who was just recently a council member, Bob Polito, kindly apply for that position. And so he's not here. I don't see
He's
him.
online.
Okay. Do you want to say anything, Bob?
Mr. Polito, you should be able to unmute.
No, I don't have anything to say. If
The volume's
If any-
low from the
if-
online. Hang on, Bob.
Can you hear me
I'm
now?
glad to hear you.
I have nothing to say. I'm happy to do it if you want me to, but if there's any objection from any of you, then I withdraw my offer to serve.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I'll ask them right now. Okay, does anybody on the council object to Bob being on the planning commission?
I just have a comment about the process. Because this vacancy just occurred.
Mhm.
And has it been publicly noticed that there was a vacancy? And have we given any other opportunity for any other residents to step up? It is a short term. It's only for a year and a half. And I know in the past, for the planning commission especially, a lot of people would like to, maybe sit on that committee. If there wasn't a chance, I know there's 2 spaces coming up in June. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yep,
There's 2 vacancies going to be on the planning commission come June, terms expiring. So, and people aren't going to re-up, but it is for a 4-year term. So if anybody wanted to serve for 4 years, you have that opportunity. This is just a short-term opportunity. But I just think that the process, we usually have a public outreach or notification timeframe.
So no, this was not noticed, as is traditional with vacancies on commissions or committee or commission. We didn't advertise it. The vacancy came up due to a voluntary vacancy on the commission. And then former council member Polito volunteered, and talking with the mayor, it was put on the agenda to give the council the opportunity to consider his appointment for the short-term position. Or you could also direct staff to process it just like any other vacancy and advertise and solicit other applicants.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I think that it would be wise to advertise it. Otherwise, the appearance isn't good. It looks like Bob just left the council, and without doing public notice, we're bringing him back. I will support Bob to be on the planning commission, but I just think from an appearance perspective, it makes sense to publish it and put this on the March agenda.
okay,
That's kind of my feeling.
all right. How about y'all?
I agree.
Okay. Then.
Yeah, I withdraw,
Although I'm sure he'd be
withdraw
great
my
on-
Bob's talking.
volunteerism.
Oh, Bob's trying to talk again.
Really- Really high tech here. I'll turn volume up. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, and I withdraw my offer to actually, it was kind of a recruitment, but I withdraw my name from consideration.
Okay, when it gets advertised, are you going to reapply?
I don't know, probably not.
Play from the audio of my iPad.
We shouldn't.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, I can't hear.
No, I think it's coming through his computer.
It's just my computer where it's playing because I somehow turned my
All
right.
audio on.
Well, anyway, I think the decision was to advertise, so we'll advertise it, and if we get applications, we'll look at them.
Not to say that he wouldn't be a
Oh,
great,
we
Well,
should
he's not gonna
encourage
apply,
Bob
that's
to
what he
apply.
said.
right, he would. Okay,
All right,
thank you.
all right, thank you.
should take public
We're
comment
done
on
with
this
that.
item as
Number
well.
9, we're on number 10 now. Discussion of the Housing Coalition letter and other alternative solutions. George?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As part of the public comment on the town's 6th cycle housing element, the council received correspondence from a group of Atherton residents coalescing around the name Atherton Housing Coalition. The letter sought to provide the council with options for consideration as part of the housing element review and approval process. And during the review on January 31st, the council asked that staff return the AHC letter for discussion by council at the next regular meeting, which is tonight. Specifically, the AHC proposal accepts the town's inclusion of ADUs, vacant lots, and urban lot splits and multifamily opportunities at school sites, but also recommends that the council consider town-owned property for multifamily. In specific, the AHC proposed that the town consider the Gilmore House at the park, the Corporation Yard here in the town center, as well as 28 Almond Draw, which is currently owned by the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. The item is an opportunity tonight for the council to have a discussion around the recommendations in the letter, as well as a discussion of any alternative housing solutions. But it's important to remember that because this discussion can be wide-ranging and cover a variety of solutions and suggestions, there has not been any specific notice provided to any members of the public in anticipation of tonight's conversation. Council discussions of specific properties, should the council wish to drill down, staff recommends that the council provide proper advance notice to any affected property and a 500-foot radius of said property before hosting a particular granular conversation around that particular property. So broad brush conversation. If you want to drill down and get specific, we really should provide notice to the neighbors and the specific property owners.
All right, thank you. So, again, as George said, we're trying to just get some ideas, okay, of what we think. They had some good ideas. They had some ideas that we had discussed before. Maybe we'd want to revisit those, but what we're hoping for is to get a few ideas and then, then we can drill down on them at a later meeting. So I'll open it up to.
So are you
Your
saying
question.
these specific 3 bullet points ideas that are in the staff report, or any other ideas that may?
Any other
percolate?
ideas too?
It was
Says
agendized
or
for like
alternative.
broad.
Broad brush.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked several times about all 3 of these.
Yep, I know.
Okay.
I know.
Well, I
So
know.
Put it on the agenda because it was asked by the council.
You have 2 people with their hands up behind. you.
Yes, Rick.
I just wanted to point out that as stated in the staff report, although George didn't just mention it, that the letter also clearly objects to the inclusion of 23 Oakwood as which we included in our filed housing element.
So-
Because they saw it as not in the town's interest to support approving a multifamily unit in the town.
Yeah, because they didn't want to have
On
anything,
private property,
anything
not
rezoned in the
school
town was
property.
their intent.
Right.
So
Yes.
There were 2 other things in it. One was the idea that we would resubmit, and George was talking about that. So maybe you can talk about the idea and your feedback to us that we can't submit. It's not wise to resubmit a new one until the other one's been. through
Right.
the
Yeah,
system.
yeah, he copied
You'd
that. He
never
sent
do
that
that.
out.
That's like negotiating against yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Why
But
would
I
you do
thought
that?
for the people here, it might be good to hear that. That wasn't part of what he just said. And the other point that they brought up was SB 167. And you actually researched that as well, George. So can you kind of share with everyone here what you shared with us on that?
Sure, I'm happy to. So on the first one, there's no provision in the law currently to allow a concurrent review by the state of multiple housing elements that are certified and adopted by the local agency. As Councilmember Lewis articulated, it's kind of negotiating against yourself. The state review process requires the town to review and incorporate comments from the state in subsequent submissions of the housing element, creating multiple iterations of a self-certified and adopted housing element, none of which would have had the required environmental review as well, has the potential to expose the town to some legal challenge. That process for environmental review takes approximately 6 months to complete and involves legal public review, comment and noticing phase, not only by the town and the community, but affected agencies such as Cal Water and Sewer and Power and Fire. Having multiple versions of a certified and adopted housing element going through the same process at different times is likely to create confusion amongst the public, review agencies, and the regulatory agencies. The town can add measures to its environmental review as we move forward in the process to make tweaks and changes along the way, and that would be incorporated into that environmental review and then resubmitted to the state as our next iteration of certified and adopted element. That was the first question. The second was on SB 197. It's unlikely to receive any legislative support. SB 197, adopted in 2022, included some trailer language to provide for an extension of time for the completion of rezoning pursuant to an adopted housing element. Prior to the adoption of SB 197, if a local government failed to adopt a housing element that HCD found to be in substantial compliance within 120 days of the required statutory deadline, the government had to complete rezoning no later than 1 year from that deadline for adoption. SB 197 granted a local government 3 years and 120 days, subject to specific conditions, one of which was that they obtain a certified housing element within 1 year of their 2021 deadline. The law was adopted at the urging of Southern California jurisdictions that were due in 2021 for that 6th cycle. Southern California jurisdictions were ahead of Northern California, as you know. In that timeline, Northern California jurisdictions had the advantage of time in response to the new HCD allocated numbers. The law, as it applies today, provides that if a jurisdiction does not obtain a certified housing element within 120 days, the jurisdiction has 1 year to complete the rezoning, but if they do obtain certification, then they have the 3 years. Staff and the city attorney have both reached out to ABAG and other legal colleagues, and there is currently no rationale for a similar exception to be applied to Northern California jurisdictions, as the timelines are different and later jurisdictions had the benefit of that added compliance and review time.
So can I follow up with that, George? So just to summarize what you said, of the properties that we're currently discussing, what you just said is we're not talking about submitting it now, but if we're talking about it, we're talking about them for the next iteration, if there is one.
Yes,
At the next submittal, not this one, but for the next submittal, if there is one.
yes.
Can I add a recap to your recap? So the law essentially says we have 120 days after January 31st. We get 60 days is how long HCD takes to give us feedback. So probably we get, if we are not compliant, we get one more chance,
Yes.
probably. Okay. Just making sure we're all clear on that.
Clear
Rick,
as
you had
mud.
anything else?
Yes, because if,
You
and
got
then if
something?
we, and then we 1 year or 3
Comment?
years to execute.
Are we doing comments now?
Oh, we're kind of doing questions. So, okay.
We were clarifying. These were clarifying questions.
Clarifying questions. Okay.
That,
Okay, well, you have our comments, and so we're going to go to public comments now. Are there any public comments here in the audience or online? Yes, come on up.
Thank you very much. Tom Georgie with Stephanie Sargent, 425 East Oakwood Boulevard. Have you guys received any builder's remedy applications yet?
They would go to.
At this time, we have not.
Okay. Well, I think AHC has a great idea because it keeps multifamily housing out of private property parcels. And I hope this council believes that the best interests of their residents and neighbors would be served best by one of two ideas. And I know this may be for 45 days from now, but either the idea is 3 sites on private property are better than 1. So 3 sites are better than 1 as far as multifamily housing and none on private property. Or if that is not enough, that you would identify your major arteries for multifamily sites over spot zoning and all the headaches that will open up down the road. So anyway, thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Tom. Anybody else in the audience like to come forward with something? Anybody online have a comment?
No one online at this time.
Okay, well then we'll close public comments, okay? All right, so back to the council. We've all read the 11-page document. We've also sat through a number of meetings on this. And so we can just give us our ideas. My intent is we collect those ideas that people are throwing out, and I'll create a subcommittee to drill down on those, working with George, and then we'll come back to the council with those for a final vote. So we're looking for, ideas. I really like this thing about this, or whatever. So comments on the report.
One note on that, Mr. Mayor, when you create the subcommittee and you drill down on some of the ideas that come out of the meeting tonight, whatever is coming back to the council for consideration and discussion,
Mhm. Will
uh,
have to be noticed.
we would notice
Yes.
all of those particular properties. So the
Right.
council, technically, for example, if the subcommittee said, we're going to look at property X, and the city council has not had the opportunity as a body to say, yeah, we think that's a good idea, that property will get noticed, as well as the 500-foot radius of neighbors that the council is going to be discussing it when the subcommittee reports out. Is that the process you're
Maybe.
thinking about?
Like from the subcommittee? We
Right,
get
because-
notice from subcommittee decisions?
No, the
No, you
staff.
can wait
staff
to
would
do
have
the
to.
notification.
Yeah.
You can wait to do the notification with, subcommittee's gonna look at everything that it was suggested here and by the audience.
Mhm.
And we're going to, come up with like a prioritized list and ideas on, like has come up before, major arteries and things like that.
Mhm.
And whittle it down and come back with a report
To the council.
to the council. At
Unnoticed,
that time, if
right.
the council chooses, yes, we like this or we like that, then then you can go ahead and have a notice meeting. So it's a 2-month process. That way it keeps everything legal.
Yeah.
And
Okay, just want to make sure we're heading in the right direction.
It's sort of like what we started out doing,
Yeah.
months ago. No? Yes, I think so.
yeah.
I think Rick has a.
Not exactly, because we started out with proposals from the planning consultants where we had discussions about a
Right.
large number of properties that hadn't been noticed. We actually had the discussion before the notice occurred, which created part of the problem. But I think what the mayor just suggested, in difference to what the city manager suggested, is that if the subcommittee chooses to focus on one or more properties, that may come back to the council for approval before we've noticed people. And the concept would be then the council, if interested in discussing those, wouldn't have that discussion at that time, but would say, yes, we're interested in discussing that. So it would take an extra month,
Right.
during which time
Yeah.
staff would notify those people. But the principle that the city manager brought up that I think we're agreeing with is that we won't have a detailed discussion about properties
Right.
until the neighbors to those properties have been properly noticed.
Right.
Exactly.
Can someone explain the timeline of how that works in with us getting approval back? Because what I don't want to do is wait too long.
Well, the
H-
subcommittee
HCD
will do
is-
something within, you mean for this process or for what we've already
Well,
submitted?
we've submitted something, we're going through, we're going to hear back. He just said that we can't submit anything new until we hear back. But it would be nice to have,
Well, their information will
Backup.
come back in 60 days is what they say.
April 5th.
so how does this cycle with the subcommittee and they'll report back in 60 days? The subcommittee will, to us?
Sooner.
We'll
Sooner
report
than that, I
back
would
within
think,
a
don't
month,
you think?
maybe even before the next special
yeah.
session.
Yeah.
We can always call a special meeting as well, okay?
Exactly. That's at the
Yes.
pleasure of the mayor.
Yes, yes.
Why would we not want the subcommittee to be able to give notice? I think I don't know, I'm new.
Because it hadn't been
but
voted on by the
I
whole
want
council.
notice that it is being discussed at all, because I think if we're discussing whether we're gonna discuss it, maybe residents would want to be present for that discussion as well. Potential, I don't know, is that,
Well,
yeah, but like, I mean,
Why do we not want to notice other than that it scares people and it gives
Yeah.
us work? I mean, why do we not want to notice?
well,
Well,
Well, we can
because
notice,
No,
when
I
the subcommittee
mean,
comes up ideas, but
it's-
the
No,
council may not take them.
you,
but in the staff report, we've got 3 properties listed here. I
Right.
think that if the council wants to discuss any of these as a serious opportunity to change
they should be
our housing
noticed.
element in the event that our already certified housing element requires being changed, then we should discuss it tonight. I mean, we should decide that tonight.
That, at
and,
a minimum, those
and-
should be.
And if somebody
noticed.
has an idea about something else, they could bring that up tonight. This agenda allows for that. I have a question, if I can just pursue that,
Yeah.
which is on the corporation yard property. can staff give us some direction on that? Because I understand that the corporation yard barn facility, which is the only facility in the corporation yard, is right on the property line. And what does that mean in, what are the challenges there? I'm kind of in my mind, I'm aware of two potential challenges. One is if we were to comply with setback requirements for a housing unit that we authorized on that property, we'd have to evaluate that setback issue. I suppose that we could, since it's town property, decide not to comply with the setback issue, but we'd have to make that decision. And I don't think that when we discussed the town center, that's something we decided not to do. So one question has to do with the setback issue, if you could describe that. And that's obviously important because it's a small parcel and how much space is left, because there has to be some setback from Station Lane also. So is it conceivable that there could be a housing unit put on that property? That's one question. The second question is I forget it,
Well, the
but there
vi-
were two issues I had
Yeah.
with that.
Well, I can go over probably the second one is probably more practical than logistic in terms of the
Oh,
site.
what do we do with the equipment and how does that
Right.
work?
Right, so in terms of size of the courtyard, the SFPUC water line isn't interior to the courtyard. It's just on the fringes of the exterior of the courtyard, but it does have a easement line that hits the fence of the courtyard as it's on the library side. So we'd have to stay a certain distance away from that. And then you're correct, the building is on the property line for Caltrain. So properly constructed would need to move in from that, from whatever that setback is going to be. So in practicality, it's probably 35 or so feet wide and about 200 feet long. That's just the physical issues. Then there's the practical issue of moving that courtyard somewhere else. So technically, could something be built there? Yes. But then we got to figure out where to move the courtyard. So the courtyard at the park, as you know, is smaller size. It's interior to the park. It's got heavy equipment that's used in conjunction with, but it's smaller due to the limited needs and functions in the park. There's a cart for moving around trash and debris in the park. There's a small backhoe to facilitate limited trench work for irrigation. There's a small pickup truck to facilitate moving tables and chairs and other park needs. And there's a dumpster of compost and chips that are moved around the park. There's trash bins, storage buildings, and a yard area. The building and yard itself contains storage of park-centric equipment, such as replacement signage, play apparatus, restroom stock, tennis court materials, chairs, tables, parking lot materials, park horse equipment, compost. The building certainly needs to be organized. And it's possible that some of that yard space could be relinquished and returned back to the park. But the facility itself is very park centric and not street, road, drainage, and facility centric like this courtyard is. This courtyard is larger. It's designed to facilitate the needs of field crews, street crews, tree crews, drainage crews, emergency response teams, and the needs of the town throughout the town at all levels. It's also the Public Works fabrication yard. They make street name signs, those white posts, they make them at this courtyard. It's got a diesel gas tank there. It's got construction apparatus. The courtyard is also used as the town's laydown for construction projects. As you saw during, some of you may have walked through the courtyard during the construction project of the town center, or more recently, there's a large skip loader there. It loads materials into and out of trucks as they're transported to the street for pothole repair and other road projects and curb and gutter work and median repair. Those vehicles are required to have large turning radii pursuant to OSHA. That not only the skip loader, but the dump trucks themselves. And they have to move about the yard to do that. There's a dumpster there that's emptied by green waste. It's filled up by town crews when they remove illegally dumped materials from the roadways, trash, tree limbs, on the occasion of mattress, construction debris, and other materials. Emergency response crews access that site 24/7 whenever there's an emergency or an accident where they need barricades for roadways. And this is the facility from which the PD and Public Works staff respond to and retrieve their barricade materials. During active town construction and roadway projects, as I mentioned, it's a laydown area for large pipes, street lights, underground materials, construction debris, and other materials. We negotiate that with the contractors as they're doing those projects. So they may store asphalt there for road repair projects. There is a site where the town's tree contractor removes debris and stores that when chipping and servicing other town trees. If the site were occupied by 2 to 3 units, all of this activity would need to be moved into the park or some other central area of the park right now. The alternative is you could potentially use, I think as Councilmember DeGolia and I spoke about, using the Gilmore House as the courtyard, tear down the Gilmore House, create a new entrance from Watkins, create the courtyard at the front entrance to the park. So this big truck traffic is not going in and out of the park. But at the end of the day, I think that just swaps one site for another, and that other one might be more suitable to housing than this one would be. So I think that answers most of your questions.
You weren't prepared for that at all, were you?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Diana and I toured it yesterday, and there is a very small space, and it's right on the tracks as well. And so getting a developer to build something there, you know, it's going to have to be something that the town has to come up with the funds. And at this point in time, we're still paying off a lot of debt. So I'm not sure that we could materialize that for a while, but they'd only be two units. And there wouldn't be any parking. They would have to take up we've already shrunk the parking that we have out there when we redid this campus. And then there will be a minimum of several parking places that'll be gone. Plus they will have to take down 2 big heritage trees that we worked very hard to save. So we'll have Ms. Colby here talking to us about that.
Let's see. I'm aware.
Go ahead.
So to counterpoint that, I think that if you take a higher view of the application that we're using, I would question why we're having cement and trucks and all that right next to our library, right next to our town center, clearly an industrial use. So if there were a subcommittee made, I would like to look into the idea of perhaps leasing some land nearby that's close enough. I understand that we want it to be close for emergency response because that's sandbags and stuff like that. But I feel that the conversation we're having here is somewhat superficial, and I would feel that we at least need to look at all of these options that are proposed with a little more depth. So I wouldn't want to vote on any of them now or dismiss any of them now, because every single one has a gotcha. And then when you get a little closer is where we're going to find what is feasible. But I think I wouldn't want to take the tree down, but I think there is room on either side. And if we can move all the functionality to a more industrial space, it is a reasonable place to put this kind of housing. It can match the way the whole look and feel of the area that's not industrial.
Any other comments on this? Yes, Rick.
So I think the issue before us tonight, for any property, and we're on the courtyard here at the town center, is whether we think it's a serious enough issue to notify everyone that lives within 500 feet of it that we're going to discuss it to put housing on it. And I think this one doesn't fit that criteria for me. I think the disruption to that neighborhood, which they already experienced from the town center being built, the last thing I want to do is put them through that again. And I personally don't think that 30 feet by 200 feet is ever going to look like anything other than an institution. So
I
I
agree.
don't think there's a way to, I do think that it's possible to design a townhouse so it looks like you're entering into a residence, and it can be 4 residences that you can get into. I suppose we're the town council, so it may be that we could choose not to comply with the setback requirement and to build something right on the property line. Of course, people are right on the train track, but they're going to be on the train track whether they're 30 feet or 0 feet from the property line. So if we were willing to do that, then I suppose you could have a 60 by 200 foot building, and you could probably put 4 townhouses in that. We chose not to do that before, but unless we're willing to do that, I think this is not an appropriate thing to notify the neighbors that we are seriously going to discuss it at this time.
Can the subcommittee discuss it and go further without notifying?
Yeah, the subcommittee is a subcommittee.
We can
So
choose to either
until
notify.
we Hear about it, we don't have to notify. Again, I don't understand why we wouldn't notify.
Well, when
people.
you notify it, it would be in the staff report. It'd be, everything would be in the staff report. But anyway, I just gave you my 2 cents from my personal walking of that area. I personally would not like to knock down the Gilmore House to make another courtyard. And I think that using the courtyard that's already there is going to require trucks going in and out of that park more frequently than they are today. And there's lots of little kids and stuff in the park and running across into the North Meadow and things. And I just don't think that that's a smart idea. You know, so I'm not in favor really of moving the courtyard to the Gilmore House. I think that that's a foolish move when the Gilmore House potentially could offer better, a better environment. But that neighborhood has to weigh in, plus, you know, the Lane Place and the Watkins neighborhood, plus the off-road streets. They would need to weigh in on that as well. So, but it has more potential for more items as opposed to the courtyard, but.
I think that we
Mayor?
should explore all of
Yeah.
them.
So, sorry, you want to finish?
I was just gonna say, I think we should explore all of them and not take any off the table now. And
Well-
we shouldn't
well-
decide based on a superficial discussion.
Well, we
we're
will
having
just, if the subcommittee's gonna be charged with looking at everything, okay?
So I want to be very clear about what we mean when we talk about noticing the residents, you know, like if we want to look really further at, say, the Almond Draw, the Menlo Park Fire Department piece of property. We would notify all the neighbors with the little card and the mailer saying, the town council is looking at possibly developing multifamily and in that lot. We don't have any control over that lot, actually. So I don't know why it's on the list because it's not ours to play around with unless we want to overlay it now and then the fire department sells it to somebody else or something. I mean, it doesn't make sense, I think, for that. The Gilmore House, I think we have more control over it. So I think if we want to really discuss that further about what type of housing, how much, what density, how, whatever, we really need to notify all the residents. And maybe we take that as a first step with this list of properties that have been proposed by the Housing Coalition. Okay, as something, but I think it's been discussed at the courtyard and town center. To me, I don't think we should focus on that. I think it's not a viable opportunity.
Unless we move everything somewhere else.
Well, yeah, and even then, I don't think that we would get that many units on it. And, you know, so as far as making a subcommittee, you know, I think your idea is good to go and explore the town, think about it in more of a holistic, but we're not going to notice the entire town right now, right here, right now, that, you know, every property is up for potential redevelopment, right? As has been kind of discussed by some residents, you know, but I think that then you bring it back to council and say, this is like what we did before in the very beginning of our process. We didn't notify lots of people, but we kind of got down the road a little bit and people were surprised. But we would notify those areas that we identify if we need to at that time.
Well, as far as surprises, I'm sure everybody was surprised by the planning commission
Right.
statement.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
with regards to the fire district housing, the fire district may have, we should reach out to the fire district and find out what their interest is in developing that for housing for their firemen and see where they are, even though it may be long-term, and understand how many they think that they would want to put there and then zone it for that. I don't like the zoning that was proposed in the coalition's letter, because if they ever sell that property, then that zoning stays with them and they could build a high rise there.
Mhm.
So right there by El Camino, and all the people in the red shirts that were here before suddenly have that, and there's nothing that we can do because it was zoned that way. So I would make a specific type of zoning on that property and decide what type of, I recommend, and decide what type of housing we will allow. And it probably is going to be something like 4 to 6. So-
Well, we don't know, and we
Yeah.
haven't notified anybody, so I would not get too
Right,
specific
right.
there on this, okay? Let's not get ahead of ourselves there.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about anything that's in the report?
So we don't have an action item on this.
I would,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to see us explore all of them and have a report on all of them. What I don't want to have happen is that we go through and we get to the end of our however many days review, and then all of a sudden they give us feedback and we're not ready with other stuff. So I think that all of these should be on the table. If we can't talk about it right now, then we shouldn't talk about it right now. Instead, we should give it to a subcommittee that will give us an actual detailed report on each one after they've talked to the fire department, after they've, addressed some of the stuff you were talking about, after they exhausted the idea of actually moving the courtyard someplace out of the city, but close enough that it's safe. So each of these has things that need to be explored before you can make a decision. So I'd like to see all of them explored by the subcommittee, and we not make a decision or take any of them off the table at this moment, so that when we come around, we have our facts in our back pocket and we're ready to respond if we need to.
I think whatever we're going to do,
Rick has a-
everybody is going to be notified. Yes, Rick.
I think the issue for us tonight is whether we want to ask staff to notify the people that live within 500 feet of any of these properties. And the only one that I think it's appropriate to do that for now is the
Gilmore. House.
anyone who lives within 500 feet of the Gilmore House.
That's, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think the courtyard's appropriate. And
Me
we,
neither.
several people on the council have said that. We can ask the fire department what they want to do with the property, and I think we should. I think we should find out from the fire department what they want to do. We don't need to wait for a subcommittee meeting to ask staff to find that out. But depending on what that response is, then the subcommittee can evaluate what it wants to recommend to the council that we consider with respect to that site. But I don't think it's appropriate to go notify people who live within 500 feet of that site that may become a multifamily unit, because that doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah,
to
we
me.
need to get certification
I agree.
from the fire district.
So Stacy has it.
Yes. Oh, Stacy.
I think George already talked to the fire district.
Yeah, he did.
Yes, I've had conversations with the chief about what they're looking for that particular property, and they are having discussions with their battalion level staff about housing as part of labor negotiations for them. So I don't know any further details on that, but they are hoping to turn that into housing and an expansion of the station to some degree. Again, there's no plans, there's no detail. It's just early conversations as part of labor negotiations. I've also put the bug in their ear about, in Harold's before, Chief Shabelhaman, about if they ever were to offload that property, that perhaps the town might be interested in acquiring it. So they're aware of that interest by the town. And that's kind of where they are at present. But we can get
But
drill
given
down
that
further on it.
response from them,
Mhm.
does that do anything for us with respect to the housing element?
If they were to actually develop it within the next 8 years for their workforce housing, it might give us some credit to some degree, but It's workforce provided housing as part of an employer, so I'm not sure how that would actually work in
Hmm.
terms of counting it within our housing element. Sung, do you have any?
Certainly be exclusionary.
It
I
would
mean,
be,
it would not be
it would be exclusionary, not
inclusionary.
open to the public, but it's workforce housing.
Battalion
A
chief.
firewoman.
And they would, in most cases, just like our chief does, there is an income provision for that as part of their income. So there is a rent per se that they would probably be ending up paying, and maybe we could use that as part of our
Right.
count in the
Maybe.
housing element.
Yeah, probably would. But the most that they could potentially, under our current zoning laws, is do an SB 9 lot split and then build, 3 units on either side of that. And so it would go from a single family home to like 6 living environments.
Yes, and the conversation that we still want to have with the chief is what that long-term plan is. Is it workforce housing for the employee and their family?
Mm,
Or is it just workforce housing for the employee?
mm.
Their line firefighter stays in the bunk, the hot bunks in the station, so they don't need the housing there.
Mm.
It's just their battalion level staff that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it
that's-
involves a shift conversation, hours of work, that sort of thing, as part of their labor negotiations.
And all these remodeled fire stations, they don't have hot bunks.
Not
They
anymore.
have private rooms.
Yeah.
Oh, just a
Just
clarification.
want to
No
clarify
hot bunks
that-
anymore,
that
but
our-
private rooms.
that
okay.
our fire district
Right.
is well managed.
Okay, let's move on.
Well funded.
So are we thinking, just to recap, that maybe from our discussion here, that we would direct staff to officially notice 500 feet surrounding the Gilmore House?
Yeah.
That we are going to seriously look at potential multifamily development. I have to tell you, my personal feeling about that, well, maybe I shouldn't express it, but anything but some kind of a small senior living, independent senior living thing, but just not.
Well, I think that I agree with you. I think there's a need for both disabled as well as senior housing in the town.
And how many could we put there and at the park at large, I guess. But the first step would be to notice, to officially notice. Is that something that we want to direct staff to do?
I think we should notice on the Gilmore House now.
Yeah.
Clear, it's going to be a discussion item. They ought to know, we've heard from a lot of people.
Yeah, Mike McPherson.
Let's hear from them. Tell them to get some t-shirts.
Okay, and then, okay, is that it?
Any other comments?
You're only noticing one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you just decide to take the courtyard off and you decide to take the fire off?
At this point in time, we haven't decided what we want to do with those.
Okay.
But we know for a fact, because the Gilmore House has come up many, many times, that we should probably notice them that we're discussing it. So we get their input. If you think we should notice all these other people, I don't have a problem with it, but I think it's gonna cause,
Oh,
first off, we'll get the red shirts back.
well,
To me,
the
it's-
Almond Draw property, Diana, it is a very dense neighborhood there. And
Mm-hmm.
it is not on El Camino. It is down the street. I mean, it's, it's very dense. And we have no control over the
Yeah.
property at this time.
Right.
I
At
think
this
that,
time, yeah.
well, yes, right.
So I guess my position is all of these have a no and all of these have a yes. And as long as I'm hearing that we're going to explore all of them deeper and we're not throwing them off the table right now in this superficial way we're discussing it, then I'm fine with whether you notice people or don't notice people. But I do think that all of them should be explored, because what I don't want to have happen is, heaven forbid, we get to the end of our period and we're
Understand.
scrambling again.
Understand.
Yeah, we're not-
understand.
But to be clear, we're not exploring them at the council.
But we'll get a report back. We will get a report that says, this is where this stands. And someone actually went and did the research to go and talk to the chief, to look at all the alternatives. Like, there's a lot of different ways to address each of these. So we need to look
Maybe,
at all of them.
maybe not. I don't know if there is.
Well, you're not going to get a thesis, okay?
I
in a
do have,
month.
I do have a question for staff on the Almondrall address. Right now it's zoned R1A. And the fire department could decide to modify the house that stands on that property and make it into some kind of living quarters more formally than we did previously with the Gilmore House. That would not involve a rezoning. And I don't know how that gives us benefit in our housing element. I suppose we could say that at some point in the next 8 years, the fire district could decide to invest in the property and build townhouses for their staff. And in order to do that, I assume, though this is the question, but I assume we would need to rezone it. Either
right.
with an overlay on top of the R1A
Yes,
or as PFS. Is that correct?
PFS.
I have to research that a little more. As you recall, I think you and I also had a conversation around Redwood Sequoia School District and whether they could declare themselves exempt from the town's local zoning regulations as a separate district.
Right.
They did,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, and they do have the right to do that. And I do recall something with the fire district occurring in Menlo Park where there was a conversation around them doing that with a downtown property in Menlo Park. So I'd have to get back to you on the answer with respect to, would we be required to rezone it?
Right.
And what was the
right.
response from the Sequoia district?
Oh, they adopted a resolution
Yeah.
that they were exempt from local zoning.
Yeah, so Menlo Atherton High
So
School.
That's Menlo MA.
Menlo Atherton High School,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And that's why Marty Brill is coming and talking to you.
So my opinion is, given the uncertainty with Almondrall, we should look into it and the city manager should pursue that, but it's not at the level of seriousness that would involve notifying the neighbors. So the only one that we would be notifying the neighbors on is the Gilmore House, which I think
agree.
there's plenty of problems with developing that property. So I think it involves
Do too.
a considerable investigation, but I agree with what the mayor said, which is we've discussed it enough and it's proposed in the Housing Coalition letter, and I think everyone's open to it and some more strongly than others, but to me, that's at the point of seriousness where it would make sense to notify the neighbors and have a discussion at our next council meeting on that. And I'm sure we'll get neighbors involved because the one thing we know is that anytime you are going to propose changing the zoning in Atherton to enable multifamily zoning, you're going to have neighbors that are around that property get involved,
Right.
because nobody wants it.
Mhm.
If I may, I'm going to bring up a different property.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The city manager and I also had considerable discussion about the possibility of authorizing or looking into multifamily housing at Selby Lane School. That's not something that Atherton has the ability to manage because it's a public school. But what Atherton does have the ability to manage, I believe, is to annex the portion of Selby Lane School that is at the 170 Selby Lane, Atherton, California address, but is formally in Redwood City. And that is the portion of the property or unincorporated, I'm not exactly sure which it is. And that is the portion of the property that is an open field in the back of the property behind the parking lot, which I think is a little more than an acre parcel and absolutely appropriate to consider putting housing on for school staff where our need is tremendous. And at Selby Lane School in particular, there's a particularly strong need for local people. That's a Spanish immersion school. We can't do anything about that as long as that property isn't in Atherton. I mean, I'm sure we could have some opinions, but we wouldn't get any credit in the housing element. And that may not be something that will generate benefits for us in this housing element, but I think we all know this is a long-term marathon that we're in here. We're not just dealing with the next 8 years. We're dealing with a bigger strategic issue for Atherton, which is how do we meet our housing needs to provide affordable housing for the people that work in Atherton
Right.
and in the surrounding community. And I think that's an absolutely appropriate piece of property to consider this for. And to do that, we have to make an application to LAFCO to annex that piece of property. And I would like to recommend that we do that.
Yeah, you and I have talked about that several times, and I agree 100% with that, if in fact we can annex it, but I guess what's the school's position? Have we contacted?
I have a question.
No, I didn't jump out in front of the council on that one. It was just exploring it. And if the council wants us to continue that investigation,
I
we can do
think,
so.
I think that's,
I have a question
Yeah.
about it, just to kind of orient myself. Is that the area where you said it's a big open field? Is that the area that they've been, like Susan Speaker and Janet Larson, as the gardeners, they did a lot of vegetable, they did a lot of educational programs with the students in growing vegetables and plants for the kids from the school. So it was just not a fallow piece of property.
No, it's
It
not
was-
foul.
Oh, it's
I
a-
think
no.
there's a ball field on a
Yeah.
little piece
Yeah.
of it.
baseball
So,
field.
Yeah, there's a big garden
Right.
on a fair amount of it.
Yeah, okay. I,
Thanks.
yeah,
Can I
go ahead.
comment?
Yeah.
I actually walked that property as well. And that area that's the garden, a lot of that whole area now has a solar panel over the parking lot. There's another area on the campus that would actually, if you walk around, that looks like it would be a better place where they have temporary schoolhouses. So they're like those trailer
Mhm.
schoolhouses. And on the left-hand side, there's a big, long, unused area that's like storage sheds
Mhm.
that could easily be built too. So that
They have
they've
to
just
find some-
recently built, I hadn't been there in a while, but they recently redid their library and some of their classrooms. So there's a lot of places there that are conceivable. The problem is whether we had any interest from anyone in the school zone. When I tried to talk to the principal, I didn't get very far with it. Maybe I wasn't speaking the right language, but I don't know. That is something, I think that would be a great one. And the whole idea of annexing, I'd like to see us to go to the second level of that. George and I talked, and can I bring up some other annexing ideas since we're brainstorming or no?
It's pleasure of the council in terms of other solutions, but just to be clear, we can't annex something in another jurisdiction. That jurisdiction doesn't want to let it go.
Right.
yeah, and then there's a negotiation on the tax. If they're
Right.
getting tax money out of it, they don't want to give that up. So then there's a negotiation, and we don't want to take on property without the property tax,
Can I ask,
because it pays for staff.
But there's no tax on Sully Lane School.
No, there's not. I'm not talking about Selby Lane School. I think it's a good idea that we continue to pursue it. She
Stacy.
was talking about doing further down Selby Lane, I'm sure. There's several places. And then
Yeah.
on the right-hand side,
Yeah.
as you're going west, it's unincorporated San Mateo County.
Right. And gentrified, Stacy's got her hand up.
Stacy has
can I
it.
just ask a
Yeah.
annexing process question? So, because I don't know about any of these properties, but my understanding is that if we annex land from another municipality, we would probably also inherit some of their arena allocation
That's correct.
potentially. Okay.
But see, the problem is we stop there. So we don't know how many, we don't know how big a no that is. So what I've been feeling, we come up to these things and we talk about them, we hit a no, and then we kind of give up. So there's a bunch of annex. So certainly the Selby Lane Schools one, and the ones I was going to mention is on the unincorporated side near Fifth Avenue over there are some neighborhoods that could be gentrified. And that's another one. So it may be that number of what we take of the arena, if it's like one lot's percentage of the whole, nobody can answer what that is. So until we know what that is, we can't make a decision on that. So I think the whole thing of annexing needs to be researched a little bit better. And there's a handful of ones other than the school that might be looked at too, that might make sense.
Yes, I have more
Go ahead.
annex process questions. So, how long does this take? Like, is this like a 2-year process, 8-year process? Like, what are we, because this I would assume would be us annexing would be for the next arena. cycle probably, or
Annexation isn't under necessarily our control. It's a LAFCO process. We can apply an application. They look at it from the perspective of their municipal services review. From a policy perspective, is it a good idea for this area to be a part of that community? Is it not already served? Which is why if it's already served by Redwood City or Menlo Park, LAFCO is not going to approve that de-annexation from that jurisdiction into ours just for the purposes of RENA.
right?
If it's unincorporated county, there's an incentive to annex those areas into a municipality. So they call them county pockets of land, islands out there. And there's studies that are involved. There's, as the mayor mentioned, there's property tax sharing agreements, there's infrastructure sharing agreements. We end up taking their infrastructure. We have to pay them for their financial investment that they've put into that infrastructure. There's multiple agencies that have to be also serviced. So if they're serviced by West Bay Sanitary and that's not where Atherton receives it, then they have to be transferred from one jurisdiction to another. It gets a little complicated. So the whole process can be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line before it even completes. And those people in that area have to vote to actually be annexed into the jurisdiction you're talking about.
So they would have to opt in to being added to Atherton if we're, and also knowing that we want to do it to add
Yes.
density to their neighborhood.
We've had some neighborhoods up off of Stockbridge asking us to annex them
Oh,
in Woodside because they wanted to have Atherton but then they got, they got something that they
then it
wanted from
stopped.
Woodside. Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, so I mean, it can
There's
go
also-
both ways.
Right, and there's also different land use and zoning provisions within each jurisdiction.
They were
So for-
restricted. and
So
we
they
were
may be more
generous.
restricted and we're generous, or they may be less restricted if they're in the county and we're more restrictive here. in Atherton.
Yeah,
Yeah, the school idea is the best of all these right now because it's a school, so it doesn't have tax issues. We just have to talk to them and see if they're even interested in it. And I would hope they would because
that would
half
be-
of them is in Atherton.
That would be something the subcommittee could
Yeah.
ferret out.
Yeah.
And it's not just that half of it is in Atherton, half of it is in Atherton. And that property, all of that property, both what is in Atherton and what is in unincorporated county is served by Atherton
Yes,
Services.
That's correct.
So I think there's a very strong argument for that annexation. And I agree with the mayor that we need to meet with the school district and talk to the school district about it. It's not something that we want to surprise them with.
No.
There's no point. I mean, the purpose of doing it in the long run is to explore providing housing for their staff, which is greatly needed, and it would be affordable housing. And we've seen what happened up in Los Banos, and this is something that lots of communities are exploring. Menlo Park's going to be doing it in this housing element. So I think it's a great thing for us to pursue, and it addresses the issue in a more strategic way for the future. It's come up a lot in the course of this housing element discussion as to, well, why doesn't Atherton just acquire some property next to it and build a high rise on it? I mean, that's not what Atherton's into, number one. It's not who we are. But if there is a benefit to not just the town, but to those that live and work in an area next to the town, I think annexation is something that we could consider. The only inquiries I've had from Atherton's neighbors in the last 5 years about possible annexation is we've been contacted by neighbors who live on the north side of Stockbridge about whether Atherton would be interested in annexing that. And I was mayor at the time, and the city manager and I discussed that, and we informed those residents that if they were serious about that, they needed to contact their neighbors because it requires a vote of those that live in the area. And we don't want to go down that path of even taking our council time to discuss it if in fact there's not a majority or a good majority of people who live in that area that are interested in it. And I haven't heard back since then. We've also been contacted by people that live further up on Stockbridge I don't know if it's Woodside or County, but who've been interested in being governed by the Atherton regulations rather than the regulations that they're governed by. That's more problematic because I think that's Woodside. And that didn't go forward. Quite some time ago, Atherton had been contacted by neighbors both in the North Fair Oaks areas and in the area of Menlo Park that includes the seminary. Menlo
Vintage Oaks.
Vintage Oaks.
Vintage Oaks and those didn't go forward.
Well, that's
Frankly,
separate.
the
That's
idea of
separate.
annexing those kinds of properties, I mean, I would not be interested in doing it because we're thinking we would put public housing on those properties. That's just not the reason to annex property. It's not what the neighbors are going to want. They want to join Atherton for a different reason, not because they want their neighbors to be townhouses. They want their neighbors to be like the rest of Atherton is. So I just don't think that that's the right answer. I mean, the question about looking at Fifth Avenue, which is, you know, there's obviously a gas station and a couple convenience stores, and it's a different environment. It's a commercial environment, and there's some residences around it. If you looked at that 40 years ago, the council would be horrified to even have that discussion, because there were commercial properties in Atherton at El Camino Real and Almondral, which were decided to be removed in the 40s, and they were given 25 years to move out, and so that's no longer there. But I think that's a very big discussion for us, that it's not going to come forward for this housing element, that's for sure.
Well, if everybody else is talking about annexation, the people on the other side of Ravenswood have contacted, said, we'd like to be part of Atherton,
Yeah.
you know, but they're not, they've already built out their homes, and I don't believe any of them are planning on selling. They just want to be part of Atherton because there's a boost of it, you
Address.
know.
There are some complexes like the Atherton Apartments that are right on the suburbs. George got an inquiry from, was a senior citizen center. I mean, I feel like we're dismissing things before we get deep enough into them to dismiss them. So the whole idea of annexing there might be a there, maybe not, but there might be a there, because there are some properties like the Atherton Apartments, which was one I was looking at, which is an apartment building literally on the line between Atherton and I guess unincorporated Redwood City.
Yeah,
So-
we did receive contact from those folks who said they might have residents interested in annexing their complex into the town, and they thought that the town would then be able to get credit for the below market rate units that are already in that housing unit. And my response to that individual was, we would not. Those have already been counted by HCD. We wouldn't receive credit for it. All we would get is responsibility for that property.
Right, but if we were to then make it contingent on them building a little further or subdividing further, or, you know, if we just take it on face value, yes, it's just 1 for 1 and we can't get those numbers. But if you take that complex, you update the complex, you add another set of apartments there that are on top of it, maybe. So those are the kinds of things we should look at, I think.
Well, this is going to be a 1-month subcommittee, so it's not a full-time job for the subcommittee people. So we're going to have to narrow some things down, but thank you for all the ideas. Yes, you have a question, comment?
I have a comment. I think all this annexing thing sounds very exotic and interesting, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna get us compliant in the next 100, you know, in our goal in our next draft. So I feel like that all should get tabled for a much later discussion once we're compliant with this.
Well, no, I think the Selby Lane School needs to be considered. And we need to contact the principal and the school district and talk to them about it. And we have a valid case for taking it. It's a large field, and it would be zoned for 20. And then we got credit for the low income, and I think that would certainly help our numbers. So And that's been discussed for a while, and I think that it's a very viable thing, and there's a great reason for asking for it and things like that. So in areas where we're already providing police services and other services, we should have that property in our town because, you know, we want to get the benefit for having it here. So, but anyway.
I think the Selby Lane annexation conversation is one that I agree we should at least begin, but I also agree, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to impact our certification process with the state at this point. It's still a little speculative.
Yeah.
Well, we would, if we have agreement that we would move forward. And
That's, but it's not up to us. Ultimately, it's up to another agency.
No,
not-
moving forward is
Yeah.
beginning the process
Yes.
to prepare an
Yeah,
application. to
right,
LAFCO.
preparing it to LAFCO and submitting it, and we put that in the report, and as such, we believe it's going to be a positive thing. And we're rezoning it. So. Okay, all right, any other comments from council? I think we have our direction, yes.
I think in anticipation of potentially not being compliant for our next housing element and knowing we have a new planning department here and I'm being the new council person, I think I would love and maybe this is what the subcommittee will do, but a reset where the planning department presents some ideas. Is I think the feedback I was getting a lot from residents is that it felt like the council was arbitrarily pulling ideas and that we're not urban planners. And so having the experts represent ideas for us, especially now that the residents are paying a lot more attention to it now than they were 2 years ago, I think would be useful for the
We did that
council.
at the beginning,
Right, I know, but that was
okay?
2 years ago, you know,
A year
like
ago.
a reset.
It was a year ago, and their first thing was just rezone half the town. Okay, that wasn't gonna fly,
Yeah,
okay? But they can be part of our discussions with the subcommittee.
I mean, they have value.
Yeah.
I
take
think
that.
having urban planners
Yeah,
making recommendations about
This is
a lot of
not
what
an
we're hearing is this neighborhood can't handle this density for these reasons, and we're not urban planners. So I would love to hear from an urban planner that we pay our planning department of like, you know, this is what would be appropriate for this
Okay,
neighborhood.
hopefully
kind of thing.
we could have some of the people from the planning department participate in the subcommittee. Is that,
Sung and I will both be present.
okay, great, there we go.
You can guarantee.
I guarantee that he's gonna look at it and give us input.
Staff will be all over you.
And just to be clear, the council hasn't considered any rezoning that didn't specifically come, except maybe the 3 items that are listed in this letter.
Mm.
But there's zero multifamily housing location that's been suggested by the council
Right.
that wasn't initially suggested by the planners.
Right, I get that, but I'm on the council. I think there's a lot more public interest in this.
Oh, there
who are
is.
Not
Yes.
understanding the process
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how
yeah.
we even got to
Yeah.
the option.
No,
So
I
I think
think that's
having
right.
using it as an opportunity for public outreach to explain to people kind of the process, now that people are paying attention a lot more than they were.
Yeah.
Initially, I think there would be a lot of benefit to that for having people feel more comfortable with why certain lots are being considered.
Well, we actually did that in April at the park. Everybody got a letter and was invited by email. I don't know if you attended or not. I don't recall seeing you there, but we did do that. There was only about, what do you say, 35 people came?
Yeah,
But
My
but
point
the point
remains
is,
that-
We're gonna do it again.
people are now
Unders-
engaged.
yes.
People weren't,
That-
I mean,
that's-
that's true. That was 6 months into the process for us.
Yeah,
But for the rest of the town, that was when it began.
yeah. And
Because it was coming after that
We can
the whole
have it- we can have
proposals
an open
occurred
meeting.
for,
If we,
know.
if we get a rejection with comments, we have to address the comments. And we have to come back, we'll have a certain number of days to do that, and within that day, there'll be extensive public outreach, just like we've done before. Did you want to come up and make a comment? We've already closed public comments, but I'll give you.
It's okay,
No.
do it.
Go for it.
Just wanted to share, I agree with Stacy as a resident. I was at the park meeting and I appreciate the effort. But what I'm hearing now is very different compared with what was presented at the park. So for people who are not like you completely immersed in this, it may look like we're throwing ideas in and out, in and
Mhm.
out. So it would help the residents to kind of help us, where are we now? What got accepted, what didn't, and maybe a little bit of how we can, it will help us kind of help
Yeah.
your team. So
Okay,
I
fine.
wanted to second that.
Thank you.
Good idea. All right. Any other comments? Yes, Rick.
I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight because the number of people that we have here tonight is about the number of people we had in the park last April. And I think it's true that this town is now engaged. We have people here because they're concerned about what these zoning possibilities will be that we are obligated by the state of California to examine. And we've really got the residents involved now. That's not to say that residents won't get more involved when the proposal is to put a townhouse next to their home, because wherever that happens, they're going to get more involved.
Yeah.
But we've got residents involved now, and that is an enormous benefit to us as a council and to this town as a community. And I really appreciate it, everyone that is in the room and online. It's really important that you are involved with this with us because we don't have a choice. And frankly, you don't have a choice either. So I'm really glad you're here.
All right. Well, I echo Rick's comments and it was very satisfying to see the number of people that came. 220 people were here last meeting, providing their input, and that shows public participation. So I do appreciate that. All right, so next we have
11.
item number 11. I'm looking for it here. Okay, discussion and consideration of the 100-year celebration committee. They made a report and suggestions to us, and now we have to decide, do we want to make a standing committee, how we're going to appoint people, or what we're going to go do. So with that, we'll go to George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In January, as you mentioned, the mayor appointed Councilmember Lewis and Councilmember DeGolia to serve as the town's ad hoc city council subcommittee for the planning and execution of the 100-year celebration in September of 2023, incorporation date September 12th. The subcommittee met and discussed the need for additional support
Yes.
for such a
Any
large
hands?
event in the form of residents that may be interested in helping plan and execute. The subcommittee spoke with a number of residents that might have been interested in participating in varying capacity. Ad hoc subcommittees, as you know, are non-Brown Act subcommittees. They're made up solely of less than a quorum of the city council plus staff or consultant assistants. However, when a subcommittee adds the general public in support of their mission and begins to meet with outside members, that ad hoc subcommittee converts to a standing committee to be ratified by the council. As a standing committee, the committee is subject to the Brown Act. All communication must occur at publicly noticed meetings held in a publicly accessible location. Meetings must also be published, have recorded minutes, and communication amongst the members of the standing committee with respect to their charge must occur in public and cannot occur in private or via email. Via tonight's agenda item, the council can review and discuss the creation of a formal town committee similar to any of our other town committees and consider the recruitment or immediate appointment of members to such a committee. If the council chooses to create that, it would also be appropriate to articulate the charter for the committee and determine the size of the membership for voting purposes and quorum purposes. Alternatively, the council could ratify the subcommittee as a standing committee of the council and allow the same activities to occur, working with staff, developing a plan, a budget, presenting to council, et cetera. But the standing committee would be allowed to add the general public to the team, not the committee, as they go along based on the individual's level of commitment and ability to contribute. And the standing committee would still be required, as I mentioned, to set up public meetings and post agendas and such, but they'd have a little more flexibility and be a little more nimble in planning the event. So that concludes the staff report and council pleasure.
Anybody have any questions on this? Are there any public comments? Okay, I'll start on this. I think that, I think the standing commit, there are many, many people that I think can contribute to this, working with Rick and Elizabeth. And if we have a regular committee, there'd only be certain number of people that would be active. And then, you know, they can't. Yeah, we don't, there's probably 7 or 8 people that are critical to helping set this thing up. A standing committee, like you said, George, does allow them to, have people come in, for specific comment or specific item that they're going to go work on, et cetera. I do think I'd like to add one of the things that the subcommittee is going, or the standing committee would do is that one of the first things we need to know is an estimate on what you think the budget is, because we want to set a budget on this.
You want a budget?
I want a budget.
Oh, my.
I want a
gosh, it's
budget. Last time,
$100.
I don't care. I want a budget, okay? Things aren't going to get out of
Dollars a year,
control.
$100 a year.
$100 a year. Woo. I mean, it's a big deal, Mayor.
I know it's a big deal, so you justify what you're gonna
Have you
spend.
looked at our
All we're
financial
saying-
statements? Like-
All we're saying is we want a budget, so you come back with a recommendation, that's all.
Has the committee reported out anything yet? Any ideas or where?
Well, we
Yeah,
haven't
came up with
formed a
this.
committee. It's just been,
Well,
well,
we're
yeah.
just seeing forming of the committee, but were there ideas or have we? narrowed
They
down
didn't talk to us
anything?
about ideas.
we're not talking ideas right now.
They
Okay.
were asked to just decide how to move forward. I did ask in the report
Tell you
that
what
they
we-
say
No,
what they think the budget would be.
I'm
but-
overruled by the
we'll take
senior
that.
member.
So
All right.
Yeah.
So,
So I agree with you. I think that the alternatively, the standing committee would give us the most flexibility and potentially involve the most residents who can come in and come out of the discussion and the planning as their schedules and their talents are needed. And so that's what I would prefer.
all right, let's hear from the other standing committee person.
Yeah, no, I think the concept is more a steering committee.
A steering committee.
So as a steering committee, we're the constants. We'll be there the whole time and we'll try to draw residents in as much as they're willing to come in. Some of them are going to come in for shorter times than others, but I think having the flexibility of not having a set committee of residents gives more flexibility, and it will make those residents more comfortable to be able to participate, because frankly, many of them are very hesitant to make an ongoing commitment. They want to
Long-term.
be involved with what they want to be involved with. And I think as a steering committee, we can manage that.
Okay. And if you were, the steering committee, would it be an overstep to ask the steering committee people to, during monthly council reports, to report what they've done and where they are on this?
No problem. I actually think that's quite urgent, because
We're running out of
we've
time.
got
It's an urgent.
barely more than 6
urgent-
months.
it's an
I mean,
urgent
that's
situation.
pretty urgent.
I know, and that's why.
We got to decide this within 3 months, I think,
Yeah.
to make it happen.
Any other comments from council?
Stacy.
If that's what you guys want, then let's do it.
And- Okay,
Just to be clear, though, the Brown Act doesn't classify steering.
No, I
committees.
understand.
It's a standing
that's-
committee, just for the record.
It's a standing steering
it's
committee.
a standing committee that there's called the steering committee.
So at this point, you can't give us any hints? Is the historian involved, I assume, and?
Well,
Marion's involved.
yeah,
But-
but that's just really preliminary. I mean, there's just be patient. We'll
Yeah.
have,
We're
we'll have
gonna
a
get a
lot more to report next month.
We're gonna get reports ready. So as we're talking about reports, do we have any council reports?
I promised one.
I have one. I came prepared. So I was the alternate for Caltrain. And the Caltrain update on that regional committee is that the region is working on creating a collaborative effort to seek funding and kind of create a unified approval process, permitting process, whatever, for grade separations, which doesn't apply to Atherton, except that Menlo Park's Caltrain station is close to our border. So that's something that we'll need to watch out for, but exciting things where they're going to be trying to chase big funding for the whole group.
Okay, anybody else? You can just give a summary.
Oh, what did
All right, we'll
Well,
go to
tomorrow I'm gonna be with the commute.org, so I can't give an update on that. And they only meet every other month. At CCAG, there was an update on the express lanes that went from Whipple to South San Francisco, that has been opened, and then experiencing tremendous potholes, which was just horrible. So there was a lot of analysis about why that happened, and kind of understanding because of the heavy rains, and the overlay had kind of just been done. But anyway, they're fixing it, and the contractors got a lot of criticism, but they came in under budget and on time, under schedule. And for all evidence, it's working really well, which is the express lane. You need a fast track transponder in your car to use it. And it's HOV if it's over 3 or more passengers, it's free. Otherwise, it's a toll. But we've completed that, and it's been about a 7-year project, I think. Anyway, so that was something.
Okay,
All
great.
right, thank
That's a
you.
great report.
That was just ad hoc on my head.
Well, that was terrific.
Thank you.
I can report on, I went to the San Mateo Emergency Response Meeting. And they were reviewing the response to the recent storms, and there were a lot of cities that were very unhappy with the response. Many of the ones on the shoreline, and they did go and they created a new subcommittee, which we have the option to join if we want to look more at emergency response and some of the problems of what went wrong with that. They reported out that they're doing a 2-year study on Zone Haven, and they've added traffic analysis to Zone Haven. And trying to remember what else they said that's relevant to us. They were complaining about how they're doing multi-year studies on the fire response, and that our RENA numbers are going to, by the time they finish their study, our RENA numbers and what we're building is going to make it all obsolete. So there's a disconnect between them evaluating our response and all the houses we're building. So they were a little up arms about that. So that was kind of the biggest upshot there.
All right, Rick.
2 reports. Peninsula Clean Energy has authorized a number of rebates for people that choose to replace gas appliances with electric appliances. So either water heat pumps or space heating and cooling heat pumps. Those rebates go up to $6,000 per installation. And PC has also authorized a $10,000 no interest loan that would be repaid through the utility bill. So there's quite a bit of focus on giving support to people to replace natural gas appliances with electricity. And secondly, and somewhat related to that, is today I attended a meeting of the Resource Management and Climate Protection Committee, which I'm gonna be resigning from at some point in the next few months. And just because it's too much for me, but today there was a report, and this committee has extremely interesting reports on both water and energy related issues. And today there was a report from BACMed on the Air Quality District's proposal to put in rules that will affect all 9 of the San Francisco Bay counties for burnouts of either hot water heaters that are gas generated or furnaces that are gas generated. And they basically gave us a summary of what's being proposed at their March meeting, which has been in the press recently. But the bottom line is that the proposal is that any residential water heaters that are gas, if they have to be replaced, they will have to be replaced with an electric heat pump. And the same for furnaces, with the gas water heaters being, actually their jurisdiction isn't going to require exactly what happens in the residence or the business. It's what can be sold in the counties. And a natural gas water heater will not be able to be sold in any of the 9 counties beginning January 1st, 2027. And a gas furnace will not be able to be sold in any of the counties beginning January 1st, 2029.
Did that pass, or is that what they're considering?
That's what they're considering in March, and they've gotten 600 comments, and the comment period has closed, although people can comment at the meeting in March. But based on the report that I got today, it's pretty clear it's going to pass. I mean, it's up to the public electeds who are on that committee, but staff thinks it's going to pass. So.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, one last comment. One of the evolutions of my conversation with the fire chief was that the fire board also was planning on having their liaison or a representative from the fire district attend local Atherton council meetings. And I believe you have on Zoom now their liaison district board member Bloom is on Zoom. If you'd like to say a few words at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Well, I'll give my quick report and a comment. If you're going to do the upgrades, as Rick was talking about, and taking advantage of what PCE owns, the federal government also gives you tax credit for making some of these trade outs too. So the PCE is just the start of your savings. You could probably, I think you could save several $1,000s on your tax bill. So as far as my report is, then I attended I'm the alternate on the library board, and I attended a meeting, and there was actually no action reported, but it was more of a coordination meeting. So so that's it there. So the fire district, last year we had Virginia Corrali. She was our liaison. Now we have Gary Bloom. Gary was just elected, but I understand he's the vice chairman of the board, which was interesting. And he is actually, as I said, an Atherton resident, and he also is an EMC. So he has some good understanding. He's also run several businesses. So he's got a good understanding on the commercial side, a great understanding on the fire side, because he participates in that. And he knows what it is that a board member should do. So welcome, Gary. Do you want to say something?
Oh, sure. I can make introductory comments.
Should I turn my volume up like I
Yeah, you're
did
the only one
on
who
beautiful
does that.
technology?
I believe you can hear me now. Is that
Hold on.
correct?
No, hold on for a
Here, I'll-
second.
Okay.
We're
We'll
gonna
just
see.
do it this way. It's beautifully elegant. Okay.
Go.
Okay. We'll probably echo quite a bit on that approach, but that's fine. Thank you for having me on the meeting. George, thank you for the introduction, and Bill, thank you for sharing a little of my background. Yeah, I'm an Atherton resident, so I have interest in Atherton Town Council and what's happening in the city that I live in as well. And certainly personal passion around emergency services as both an active first responder and as well as, somebody that just has a personal interest in it. I was listening into the whole meeting, so relative to your housing element discussion and the Menlo Park property, I will take that forward. I'll bring that up with the chief and make sure that the district's prepared to address any questions you may have on that property. I'm certainly not in a position to comment on the district's position on that. I'm a little too new for that, and I don't want to get ahead of myself on that. But any questions that come along the way, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available to you and happy to be attending these meetings, and you'll see me visible at most of them, probably in person over the next few months.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Where are these buttons?
Move adjournment.
Any future item, agenda items we want to talk about? Hopefully not.
No.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Okay.